We'll call this special meeting of the City Council to order at 4 p.m. Tuesday, July the 25th. This is for discussion and direction to staff regarding the proposed fiscal year 2018 budget. This is a continuation of the overall discussion of the budget. We've had two so far. This will be item number 2A, capital funds. Mr. McDaniel, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. So we have a little bit different format this evening because you guys will roll right into your regular meeting at 6 o'clock, and we didn't have time to shuffle tables around, but we think this will work. And I wanted to go ahead and share with you the latest information that we have with regard to capital budgeting. Before I do that, though, I want to put some caveats out there. And first of all, I would say that I'd ask you to look at this as a menu, right? So it's not set in stone, and that really we're only asking you to consider the first year, which would be part of your budget. And so while we can talk about a lot of different things that I think a lot of you have felt like, you know, have some merit, no decision has to be made about doing some of these things today. Okay, so we'll certainly move through a process with the comprehensive plan and have an opportunity to get some good public input about some of these projects as well, many of which wouldn't start for, you know, a few years from now. So with that, I want to go ahead and jump right into the presentation. So this is just you're going to see a lot of this as we look at policy decisions. So this is what the council came up with at your retreat as far as your focus. We're still building a strategic plan at the staff level around these, and we'll continue to flesh it out. But you can see here, you know, things like achievable infrastructure, long-term water supply, facility plan, and so forth. These are all capital related, so this is certainly part of the budget and the 10-year capital improvement plan that you all are considering through this budget process. So starting with the General Capital Projects Fund, we'll do a high-level overview with the presentation, and then I'm going to go into detail on each project with the project sheets that you have. The project sheets that you have that were passed out to you today are the latest versions after talking with several of you about, you know, different things. There are some tweaks, so but not significant, and I'll try to cover those. So with the first slide being the general capital project priorities, we obviously have the Kerviel Sports Complex. This is opening in the fall. This is a funded project, and we'll have soccer in the fall, and then spring we'll have baseball, and we'll get into some project detail in a moment. Street improvements, we do have some carryover funds. Rather than allow those to just simply fall to the fund balance and operating budget, we want to transfer those over to a capital projects fund so that next fiscal year you would have this $959,000 from prior year expenditures that weren't, or budget that wasn't expended, plus the 1.5 that we're proposing in next year's budget. And then we would be more aggressive in terms of contracting for hopefully all of that in the next fiscal year. The tennis center, we're going to be bringing you pretty soon a proposal from for an architect or to do that project, and that's EIC funded, $1.5 million. Comprehensive plan, this is the total amount that we would have available, including next year's budget if it were approved, to begin that process. Next we have something that's quite a bit different than what you all have seen in the past. And again, I would like to consider this as a menu, and there's lots of ways to work this or not, but that we might consider a voter-approved general obligation bond election. And those would be for these different propositions that you see up here. First of all, public safety complex. Really not EIC eligible. I mean, it's going to be hard to kind of put a link back to economic development for that complex. We're estimating somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 million. It has to be scoped. We don't know if we're going to require land or not. We don't know what's going to be there. We think police and municipal court, but possibly even fire administration. We're not sure, you know, how that will ripple in terms of space available for fire administration, so they can get out of their building now that they're renting. And then The next proposition on the ballot might be streets and drainage improvements. These are yet to be identified, $6 million, and this would be tax supported as well. And then, we would work through a process to identify which streets those were. It might be existing streets. It might be adding capacity to existing streets. It could be traffic signals. It could be brand new roads. But the council would then put forth a slate and hopefully get some input from the public during this comprehensive planning process about what streets might be included, as well as major drainage improvements. And then the Aquatic Center, we have $100,000 that's been budgeted in EIC this year to begin the process of scoping that out. Will it include just a rehab of the Olympic pool, or would it also include, a covering? Would it include splash area? What might that include? And then we'd have a better idea about what that might look like in a bond proposition. This one we are suggesting would be EIC debt supported, not tax supported. And then finally, park improvements would be either part of the aquatics proposition or separate. And the idea here is that, and we'll go over the variety of parks improvements these might include, but the idea here is that you have lots of options. You can do all these on one proposition as early as May of or November of 19, or you could do them individually on separate ballots over a period of years. Or you can not do them all at all as bond propositions. It's completely up to the council in terms of how you might want to do that. This is the projected impact to the tax rate if you all were to do some tax-supported debt through general obligation bonds. And the whole idea here, obviously, is that there's no impact to the tax rate. So we would structure the debt in a way that it would layer in on our existing debt and not increase the overall tax rate. So the $10 million for public safety, the $6 million for streets and drainage would be included in here, and we'd try to layer that in so it wouldn't increase your tax rate. And we wouldn't sell it all at one time either, right? We would sell it over time. So if you had a bond proposition with, say, 4 or 5 propositions on there, we wouldn't go out and sell all of that as debt at one time, because we can't do all that work at one time anyway. So we would do it over a period of, 3 to 5 years, let's say. And we would sell it as we need it, because we don't want to be paying interest on it until we really need it. So now transitioning to water and sewer capital project priorities. Obviously we've got finish out of the reuse system. This is also funded, and we hope to complete that, or we will complete that in 2018. Legion Lift Station is a high priority that I've heard from all of the council. And so that's next up, $7.8 million, and I'll talk a little bit more about how the funding is structured for that. And then dealing with our TTHM issue, we also have some earmarked funding for that of $1.7 million that would need to go into play sooner rather than later to fix that problem. So we'll talk some more about that. Then moving out a few years later when we can afford it, because as you know, the council has a policy of no more than 35% for debt as far as your capital program on the water and sewer side. So we wouldn't do another issue until 2023 when we can layer that in and afford it without having too big of an impact on our our ratepayers, as well as just being able to do the work. I mean, there's a lot of work here. So you can see a new ASR well. This would be another test well with the headwaters joint project. In fact, this item should be on your agenda within the next month or so for consideration to begin that partnership project. And then some projects with several lift stations here, Knapp Lift Station, and then Jefferson Street Lift Station, and so forth. And I'll again go into more detail on these in just a moment. And then updating our water and wastewater master plans. You really want to update these at least every 10 years, and so we're about that mark for each of those.
Mr. McDaniel, can I ask just a quick question? I know you'll get into the details.
Sure.
But I had just notes on this particular page where you're talking for funding in 2023, but we have funding set aside for the ASR. We moved money into there. We had a balance left, and then we moved some more money into that project fund. Are you accounting for that?
We can move it up or and switch things out. And, you know, again, I think we want to focus more on what we're programming for next year. So next year, with regard to that well, we're looking at some costs associated with our partnership with Headwaters to do some things with that project that would allow it to be an ASR as well. And so that's why we're asking you, you'll see in your schedule for $45,000 to do that next year. But you could move up development of that well sooner rather than later after that.
Because we had moved the monies over in
Yes.
the budget amendment. Okay. And then the second, third, and fourth items, I know that's been on the list since about 2012. Tell me, if you can, the urgency. You're considering those in a bond issue in 2023, but they've been on the list since 2012, so I don't know reading. Maybe Stuart could help us with that. But the interceptor downstream of the Knapp lift station, Knapp wet well in Forest, Maine, interceptor downstream of Jefferson, all those you contemplate in 2023. Are we okay, Stuart, until that time?
Stuart, come on up.
Well, it depends on development. They were contemplated in those original plans because of the Ingram flow. We thought when Ingram came online, they were going to deliver a lot more to us initially than what they have, and they have. Although they are using our system, they're not using it to the full capacity of their contract. And so as we see Ingram coming online and probably not bringing a whole lot more capacity to our system, we've pushed these down the road a little bit more and use those dollars for what we consider more urgent infrastructure needs here.
So if we did something with Village West, these would affect that, or that would affect these?
Yes, that
Okay.
on a large scale out there, depending on council's policy of how much they want to reserve for Ingram versus how much we use. At one time, we reserved everything for Ingram. We said they're coming online. We don't know how much they're going to bring us, and so there was no more we were accepting. Since then, we've stepped back from that just a little bit. But yes, we need to kind of flesh that out a little bit.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, so this next slide shows what the impact would be to the ratepayer if we were to move along this capital project the way that we've got it laid out. Obviously, as you're aware, through our prior budget workshops, we are not proposing any rate increases for the coming year, but we would need some rate increases going forward. And rather than do this all at one time, you know, a little bit at a time. So in 19, 6% and 2% for water and sewer respectively. Same thing in 2020, and then 21. Our modeling indicates a 2% for sewer. And you can see there the impact to the average customer of 8,000 gallons. The next page shows graphically what that looks like compared to our peer cities. So on the far right, the highlighted area, that's where we are today and would be next year. And then Kerrville FY19, Kerrville 20, Kerrville 21, all still right there in the middle and very competitive when you stack our water and wastewater rates.
And of course, that's holding the other cities constant, which
Correct.
won't happen.
That's right. That's assuming they don't have any increases over those years as well. So before I move into the detail, are there any questions or comments about what I've covered so far?
I'm just one comment on the water and sewer fees. I'm glad we're not, jumping in 2018. We anticipated, according to the last city manager, about 9% in the next 6 years. This is aggressively more than that, and a lot of that is from the debt that we've incurred and will need to incur. So it's a little bit more, that's my only comment, than what we had anticipated last year. I wished it wasn't, but it is.
Well, and this is modeling, so, we've got big round numbers in these capital improvement plans. We don't really know what they're going to be until we scope these out. And for example, you've got the sale of the city hall. Where could those funds be applied? You've got a contingency left on reuse that may not be used. That was close to $2 million. Right. So these numbers are all still in play, and these kinds of rates may not actually be required.
Good.
And part of it's also driven by the TTHM improvements.
Right.
So what I want to do now is you have two packets of these legal size sheets, and I'm going to start with the first one that's general capital projects, and I'm going to start with page 2. Okay, they're numbered at the bottom right-hand corner.
How many numbers?
So the first one would be the Kerviel Sports Complex. Okay, on that one, this is just basically finishing this project out that's already funded. So we're not asking for new dollars here. And so this fiscal year, excuse me, we'll finish that out with the $9 million.
Do we have that for the screen?
It's not on the screen.
Okay.
Yeah. Then the next one is the indoor athletic facility. This is what we commonly call the DBAT building. And that's also finishing out this year, $2.1 million. Then for fire and EMS, now this gets back to the reserve that we set aside for ambulance services whenever we did our contract with the county. County pays us about $1.2 million. And so that contract is going, I think, very well since 2014. So we would like to go ahead and use this funding for replacement of our large apparatus and ambulances. So what's different on this page that you haven't seen before is at the bottom, we've added a list of types of equipment that we need to replace and the cost per year. So the idea here would be we transfer this $1.2 million to our equipment replacement, our fleet replacement fund, and then we would use that to buy down the cost to replace these. So it won't cover everything, obviously, but it'll help.
This is in addition to the capital asset replacement we budgeted.
Yes. So the next one is street improvement carryover. This was mentioned in the PowerPoint presentation. We'll have $958,000, we think, close to that number anyway, left over. And again, rather than let that fall to the fund balance, we want to get real aggressive with street work with contractors in the coming year. And so that's why it's being put over here for that. And so this would be in addition to the $1.5 million. The next page is the tennis center renovation, just as the PowerPoint mentioned. This would be the $1.5 million over a 2-year period, and 18 and 19, and the EIC funding is coming in at 17 and 18, so this year and next year.
And is that realistically enough, or do we?
Good question, Mayor. So you all are going to be awarding a contract pretty soon for the person that will do the work of scoping this out. And we want to at least deal with the existing facility and upgrade it to better standards. If there's money left over, we might look at some other enhancements, or we might ask for some foundation partners or somebody else to come in, or some of the other users to come in to help with any enhancements.
I'm sorry, one other question. In 17, we show nothing spent, but design we will, right?
Probably not. We probably won't get our first bill until going into the new fiscal. If we do,
right?
then we would reflect that.
Okay.
But yeah. So the next one is River Trail, and this one shows us spending the balance of the $747,583 in 18, and this would be after, what would be left over for construction after design. Is that right, Amy? There's all the design work in the current year?
In 17.
Okay, all the design work is in 17, and so the balance is for construction.
And so our original one was 722,583, but it's 747, and okay.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
is that, do we
gonna-
have any idea about an estimated cost on that to the deeder?
We're hearing from the architect or the engineer that this should work, but we really won't know until we get it out on the street.
Okay.
So this number of 747,583 could look a little bit different, just depending upon how much we pay this year versus next year for the design. Again, this is just like with your other 2 budget work sessions. These are all drafts because we're not, really to nail it down until we get into next month and present the proposed budget. The next schedule is for Shell Hayes House, And this is pursuant to phase, actually one, I had mentioned to some of you it was phase 1. It's actually phase 1, 2, and 3 of the project. I think there's a 4th phase, is there not, EA?
Well, we've got the partial phase, which is basically some of the minor work we've done kind of around there already. But really the 3 phases that were illustrated in Mr. Peter Lewis's presentation to council a couple weeks ago.
So this would finish out all that he had laid out for us, but he didn't scope the entire building, right? There was some reserved?
That's correct.
Okay.
For major renovations of the interior of the building, there would be additional work.
Okay, that was the point I was trying to make.
Yes,
okay.
sir.
All right, and so this contemplates a donation to help make that happen. So the funding for that has not been identified. And that would not be in this year. This year would be next year at the soonest, possibly later. All right, next is parking garage repairs, and this is not any part of what Peter Lewis's presentation was about. This is just basic deferred maintenance. And so we basically doing this through cash on pay-as-you-go transfers from general fund and some interest income. And so this is work that we definitely want to begin doing this next year because it's definitely in need of repairs.
And I've asked about it a couple of years, and thank you so much for looking into that, all staff. I think that's going to be real important as much as we contemplate using it.
Well, and I heard from confirmation from Kyle today that the contractor is going to start the repair work on the corner there where we had somebody crash into the building and doing some work to help with the water situation coming in. That's going to start August 8th or 9th or like that second week in August. The next one is landfill permitting. And this is using basically a landfill reserve to do this work. And so next year we would spend another $450,000, and this is just to get our permit. And then we'll have permission at that point with the permit to go either the options that have been identified by the engineer, and we really won't know which area is best until we get into design. And I don't anticipate that happening right away. You know, although we do want to be talking to Republic about our contract before it expires, and see if they're going to be staying in business with us, or if we got to look for a new partner, and do we use this landfill or do we continue to use theirs? So that's all kind of future conversation, but it's not imminent.
Yes, 2030 is the end. So
Right.
that's quite a ways
out. The next slide, page is the comprehensive plan. And so this is just to show you that we've accumulated the fund over 2 years, and including the proposed budget for next year, a total of $375 available for that project. And that RFP is out on the street now, and the proposals are due, I think, this coming week, next week. And so what we're trying to do is schedule some time with you all for interviews for the short list before your second meeting in August, which is when we want to try to award that. Public safety complex. As I mentioned earlier, the idea here is that this would be a bond proposition for the voters to approve, tax supported, and we've got it scheduled for 2020, assuming a bond election in 19, but it could be later. There's nothing, that says it has to be then, and you don't have to issue general obligation bonds. You have other options, but we want to get started in 18 with some cash to scope this out. Where's it going to be? What's going to be included? How much square feet? So that we can really hone in on this number. This is a big number, $10 million, and I don't think, unless we have to buy the land and it's very expensive, we have to put infrastructure to it. I don't anticipate the number to be this big. Depends on scope, obviously. Aquatic Center.
Mr. McDaniel, I made note here. Also, if we build it on our own property, wherever that would be, or do an exchange to where we own the property, that would not be included in that number. It could be just for the
That's correct.
facility itself. Mm-hmm. And it could also be offset by the sale of the existing property that it's on. There's about 0.99 of an acre.
It could, yes.
And so, it makes it a little more palatable. And then, of course, combined with the municipal court, you know, we'd have that property to do something with. So
Right, absolutely.
there's some pluses there.
I think it was Councilmember Summerlin that asked about a facility plan, and so, you know, we need to be looking at all of our facilities, because there's a ripple effect of some of this,
Sure.
right? So, okay, then the next slide or page is the Aquatic Center, and this is, again, contemplating that this would be EIC supported, but possibly a general obligation bond sold and backed by, just like we do the others for EIC, backed by the full faith and credit of the city. So it's tax backed. It's secured by taxes, but it's paid by EIC. And so that would be possibly 2021.
Mr. Manager, we had a letter about, this year we plan to spend money on design, right? Or we just have that money?
A great question. So you all asked for me to defer that until this conversation.
Right.
And so, and I guess really the adoption of the budget, but it's really in this year's budget, not next year's. So we could proceed any time now through EIC to begin scoping that. You know, we'd also want to find out from, you know, the university and the high school and so forth, what their uses might be and if they might be participating, which would drive this number down. So, you know, that we have to do that work before we pitch something to them and ask them, you know, what would you do?
I wondered if there would be any money for working on the baby pool. Remember Peggy McKay's letter pointing out that
Well, if we got underway with this
public interest.
design and scoping, that might help us to see what would be involved if we were to stage it and have phase one be the baby pool and come back later with something else. So that it's considered within the scope and the context of the entire project.
Right.
And again, to reflect what you said in the beginning, that some of this also may go to the Comprehensive Plan Committee and see
That's
there
true.
too.
Yes, absolutely. So next page is the library complex, and this is Laura and her folks basically finishing out the History Center, and so you can see $75,000 next year, and so she'll be looking at things such as enhanced exhibits and things of that nature with the funds that she's got left over from that donation. Body cameras. So this was partially grant funded, as you can see, and we have monies left, but rather than redirect this funding to some other public safety project or some other purpose, we're suggesting that we just leave it here and spend it down as we need to replace body cameras so that we have a source to do that. So it's kind of a reserve as we need it to replace body cameras. The next page is also a project that has been funded, and so this is just residual funding left over from the City Hall project. You can see the sources of funding from General Fund, Water and Sewer Fund, and so forth. And then, so there's about $20,000 that we might have to spend next year, and it doesn't have to be necessarily just on this building. It could be on, you know, aspects of the cancer center or the parking garage, but the complex, right? So I expect that will all be spent next year.
Aren't we required to spend the money we make on the sale of the old lot on City Hall too?
For facilities.
Facilities.
Any facilities.
Right.
That could be anywhere.
So y'all, I mean,
Okay.
a resident told me that we, in the budget, I guess that the prior city manager put out, there was some language in the manager's message about using the proceeds from that building to help offset the utility funds costs for City Hall, which was $1 million. But you don't have to do that. That was just his suggestion at the time because y'all didn't adopt anything. But you do need to use it for facilities.
Right.
And so whether it's to do what he had suggested in his manager's message, or it's to offset some of their costs that you all see is appropriate, whether maybe it's the parking garage and rehabbing the parking garage. You know, it could be a number of things.
I had a note here that we could use it for some improvements to the development office, as you and I spoke about, and you mentioned earlier, the cancer center, the development office, or that wall that you talked about putting for water.
Right. Exactly.
Cross street.
Okay, downtown streetscape is the next slide, and this is what Peter Lewis had proposed and presented to you all a couple weeks ago, $850,000, and this would be EIC funded if you all approved it and the EIC board approved it. So beginning next year and then the following, 19 and 20, but funding in 18 and 19. Next page is street and drainage improvements. And again, this would contemplate as an option a bond election with a proposition for streets and drainage of $6 million. And this would be a good time to say that, you know, we haven't really fully scoped any of this, as I said earlier. And so our debt schedules, you know, they're not exact. So, you know, and we're assuming a certain interest rate. We're assuming 20 years. You know, there's a lot of, we're assuming, you know, in some cases, fronting interest payments only. So we have to really work with our financial advisor to really nail that down. But we do think that we can do this without a tax increase. It depends on just how we layer it in and it may be a little sooner, a little later, but it's not an exact science is what I'm getting at. Not yet anyway. Okay, so then park improvements, this is that general proposition for park improvements, which would be, as suggested here, EIC supported. It doesn't have to be, but that's what we have here. And this would be for a variety of park improvements. And this would also need to be nailed down, and I think the comprehensive planning process, especially if there were a chapter and a committee on parks and open space, for them to tell us what are the priorities, whether it's the Aquatic Center or these items. But just as kind of some options here for you is for Kerrville Shriner Park improvements, Guadalupe Park renovation, River Trail expansion, and so on. Then next up is the Fire Station number 3 remodel. This is the one over on Legion Drive, and it was built in 1986, so it's definitely in need of some renovations. So we're targeting the use of about $500,000 in future transfers, and this is all the way out into 2023, so pretty far out.
And you know, I don't know what the priority is on that 1.2 that you were going to move over, that you talked about, you know, some capital assets for vehicles and things like that, I believe you mentioned. But I didn't know if it was urgent, if we needed to look at some of that for this.
Yeah, I think the 1.2 is really going to, because what happens is the apparatus is kind of, it's not constant. It's not a constant number. So it's really hard to budget around, because one year it's this and the next year it's this. And so if you're trying to budget operating revenue to cover that, it plays havoc with your budgeting. So this 1.2 that we put over in that reserve will help us to levelize the impact to the general fund. We still have to pay for part of it out of the general fund, but not as much, and we can levelize that impact. So that's kind of the approach there. Okay, and then this, I think it's the last page. Yeah, the last page we have for general projects is the fire department primary radio channel. This would help with some switching between 3 channels, and this is something that the chief and the fire department is recommending, and it's all the way out in year 2026 and 27.
And again, I'm assuming that he understands his own priority, and we don't need to move that.
Right. So Amy and Sandra developed this in cooperation with all the departments. Okay, any questions on the general capital projects before we move to water and sewer capital projects? All right, let's go on to page 2 of that packet. We start with the reuse system, and all this is funded except for next year, the 1.5 from EIC that's part of an agreement already, which brings it up to the 23 million, as you all are aware of that one. And again, we may not be using all that because part of that's contingency, but this is what we have left. Then Legion Lift Station, again, this is something that I've heard is a priority for all of you. This is really opening up economic development in just an enormous area, and by the time we're done with this, could be our largest lift station. So it even helps to serve the airport area. You know, the airport has its own lift stations, but those lift stations then feed into this lift station. And so we've got to have more capacity for that whole loop area, and including everything around it to enable development to occur. So this truly, I think, is an EIC project in that regard and opening up new capacity. So these would be certificates of obligation in 19. And then we need to do some planning for it both this year and next year, and that's already started in terms of the design. So again, this is a top priority.
And I noticed there's another, a loan from K-Pub. That's another loan, right?
Yes. So
Increasing.
we have some options here. The $1 million in additional, talking to Mike, there might even be additional monies beyond the $1 million available from K-Pub. What we have to weigh as a city, and of course you as a policy board, is, okay, if he's going to give us, say, 2% interest on that money, and let's say it's not $1 million, it's $2.5 million, but his maturity is 10 years. So they're bigger payments, we pay them off faster, but we're already at a 35%
Right.
ceiling in there. So we need to see if we can restructure our existing debt around that peak that we have the next 2 or 3 years as an option. And then how does this layer in on top of that? And another option might be that we pay off our K-Pub debt with a new CO, because rates are pretty good. It maybe cost us more, but it's a 20-year issue and not a 10-year issue. And then how does that layer in with everything? So it's kind of smooth that. So that's something that we'll be looking at this next year as we finish up the design here. And we'll be ready come this time next year to lay out a plan.
And I had two thoughts. We may have, as you mentioned earlier, something left over from the contingency on the reuse project. That may help, and we'll pray that it does. And also, does it affect, if it's EIC supported, how will it affect their 45% debt limit? Because we're already at what, 1.1 with them?
Yeah, I mean, the EIC board talked about that, and we'll have to also consider that as we look at how we structure all this. So,
Because I figured that'd be pretty close if you're borrowing $5 million.
yeah, and this brings up another good opportunity to bring up a conversation that Mr. Baruti and I had, and that is, looking at, what if we'd have a downturn in the economy? Well, sales tax reacts immediately.
Yeah.
So we got to carry enough fund balance over there to pay our debt. Otherwise, it hits the taxes.
Right.
So that's something also to consider as we look at more debt on the EIC side. The next one is the Kerviel North Tank Maintenance, and this is basically a project that's being completed. It's funded and completed this year. And in the picture there, it's not the golf ball on the stick, so to speak. It's the lower tank that you see there. And it's that tank is not leaning. It's just the angle of the picture.
Oh, the old one.
The leaning tank of Kerrville.
That's right. The next project is the water utility building, and that one is also being finished out this year. In fact, we're finishing up paving this week or next. Is that right, Stuart?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, next is the TTHM that was mentioned in the PowerPoint. And so we've earmarked $1.7 million. These are coming from prior sale of certificates of obligation and some pay-as-you-go transfer from Water and Sewer Fund. This is just an earmark because until the study comes back in this fall, and we lay out some options for you all, we really won't know what this number is. So this is just kind of a placeholder.
I know you don't have it today, but when you do, I had some little questions of which COs, some of these, a number of them say from COs from years past. And just as we get time, I'd kind of be curious which ones.
Do you have that offhand, Amy?
And
Well,
if you don't, that's fine.
Yeah,
We
while you
can
guys are
get it
looking at
later.
that, I'll go on.
Okay.
So then the next one is the rehab of the oxidation ditch. So this gets into projects that, as you mentioned, Mayor, are high priority that we really can't wait until 2023.
Right.
It's kind of what Stuart was talking about. So this one is it's got to be not completely replaced, but we've got to repair some of the mechanical equipment on it and do additional work. So the cost is, $800,000 that we're looking for this. And so the 7,125 in this year, is that design work?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've started design work on that one. Okay, so then the next one is the Clarifier at the water treatment plant. Same thing, starting design work this year, and then $678,000 for the following year. This is also funded by pay-as-you-go transfers from water and sewer and interest income.
Interest income on what? Not on this amount of money, on
Accumulated
Lots
overall
of
for the
money
capital
that we-
projects funds, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, the entire fund balance in the capital projects fund.
Ah.
Earns interest every month, and right now that it just goes into that fund, but then we have the option of allocating which project within that
I
fund.
see.
Needs the money, so.
Right.
But yes, this is accumulated over time.
Next project is the new ASR well, Headwaters well. We just had some discussion on this one as well, where the mayor was pointing out that we will be spending some money next year in 2018, if you all do this, to kind of upgrade the type of well that it might be to serve our needs. And then we contemplated development of the well in 2023, again, when we sell that CO, the $10 million CO, to support all those water and wastewater projects. And it could be done sooner if we decided to use some of the other monies that have been talked about previously to do this rather than some of the other stuff. And then the master plan update, the last one was completed in 2012 for the wastewater collection and plant systems. And so this is upgrading that master plan in 2019 using prior COs. This one you did have, right? Which issue that was?
It was 2013 on the last question that you had, and I believe this is 2013.
Yeah. So it looks like both of those were 2013 COs.
Because that was a split, I think, of utilities and general fund.
I
Well,
think
I'll
you-
go back. And
Yeah, you're right, it is. Okay, so now we're moving into lift stations. This is NAP. Some of you were asking me, where's that? So
Yeah.
I found out.
Walmart.
It's, right there by the boat ramp for
Chili's.
in Chili's, yes. So 2.6, and this would be again in new COs issued in 22 or 23. And then for the same location, the wet well as a separate project, same funding source in 2023, 2.4 million. Then also in 2023, with the same cell, the 10 million cell for COs, it would be the lowest tank. And also the stadium number 2 replacement or repaint. Some of you asked me, didn't we just do that? And we did. It was tank 1, but not 2. Is that right?
We did 4, right, Stuart? We've done 4, right? I thought we did 2 studio and then stadium, and then we did Summit.
We did Summit Elevated and Stadium 1.
3.
Okay, then the next page is the master plan for water, and that would be in 2023 as well. The last one was completed in 2014. And so this one is the return activated sludge pump station. And that would be, it's a small item, but it's obviously something that's got to be done out at the plant. And so that's $50,000. And then the Jefferson lift station, 1.9 million, also in 2023 with that 10 million issue. And then direct potable reuse. We wanted to at least leave it on the radar, even though I don't think we plan on building a plant anytime soon. And the scope of this plant will depend upon how many gallons it's scoped to, and the cost will depend upon that. So it's a placeholder out in the final year of a 10-year plan, so that it's just still there.
What is that number representing as far as a guesstimate on size?
Size?
Yeah.
500,000?
What were we talking about today, EA?
1 million gallon plant.
1
Okay.
million?
And again, that's an estimate. I mean,
Right.
it could be anywhere between 3 and 5 potentially, based off sizing.
Okay.
Differs a little.
Okay, then Clearwell expansion at the water treatment plant. This would be all the way out into the final year of 2027 as well. So as you get out to these 10 year, the 10th year, this is a little more fuzzy in terms of projecting what costs are and timing.
This is an expansion of the membranes plant?
It's a whole new clarifier, isn't it?
It's just a holding tank at Clearwell
Yeah, Clearwell, I mean.
at the water treatment plant. So right now we have a 500,000 gallon tank, and this will be an additional million gallon. It's a million gallon tank. Yes.
So then, some more work on the Knapp lift station later on down the road as well.
And those are 2017 prices?
Did you put an escalator in there?
We have some escalators built in from Freeze and Nichols with their original master plans. It really depends on what year we end up doing these, so, but they were using a 3% inflation factor. Some of our projections are a little bit further out than what they were doing, so, yeah, certainly we would need to continue looking at if those numbers need to be increased further.
So that completes both of the capital funds. Again, a little bit different process this year with your budget, so I'm going to be asking you not to just approve your operating budget, but also approve the first year of your capital budget. In the years past, it was just the operating budget, so that'd be year one of a 10-year plan. And the 10-year plan is not fixed in stone. It's, every year you're all going to look at that and shift and so forth, and until the upcoming year. And then even after it's appropriated, then each project comes back to you individually if it's over $50,000 to authorize it. So the two-step process: appropriate, then authorize. So with that, Mayor and Council will be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the capital funds.
I kind of jotted down an overview, and again, this is based on all the things that you are not necessarily recommending, but presenting to us and your sources of funding. I think I'm going to have to redo this because a couple of them changed to general obligation on this one we just got. I was comparing it to what we had from yesterday. But I just wanted to go by year and see what we're looking at as far as borrowing. 2019 would be, do we anticipate anything in 18, or is it all 2019 funding?
Nothing in 18.
Right. So 2019, I had a CO for Legion, trihalomethane, and wastewater master plan for, what, 5 million?
Right. 2019, we're looking at 5 million in the loan that would be EIC supported, and then potentially another million from KPUB. But like you mentioned before, there are options on if other projects come in
Right.
below or something like that.
Sure. Then 2020, I had a GO for the public safety building, 10 million.
Correct.
And in 2021 and 22, I didn't know if you meant to split that, but there was 10 million, 5 for parks, 5 for aquatics. Did you mean to do that in 2 separate years by GO, if it's approved by the comprehensive plan
We
group?
were looking at the spending being in 2 separate years, but the actual GO being in 2021.
Okay.
So I'll check that.
For 10.
For 10,
Okay.
correct.
And then 2023, Streets and drainage is another GO. Was that 6?
6.
Okay. We'll do just the amount you suggested. And then 2023 was all of the, that was a CO, right?
Water, wastewater.
Yes, for water, wastewater, and that
10
was,
million.
sorry?
10 million.
10. And that was about 8 million in improvements, today's dollars. For NAP interceptor, NAP force main, lowest tank, Stadium 2 tank, water master plan, RAS pump station, and the interceptor for Jefferson.
As
Those are
well
the-
as the 1.1 for the ASR well would be happening that year.
Okay, and we have for the ASR 1 point something already.
Yes, and then also that 10 million would help with the 1.9 million in the following year in 2024 for interceptor downstream of Jefferson.
Did I get that pretty? Okay.
Yep. And yeah, that covers it.
Did we get the numbers yet from the KCAD on the certified tax
Not yet.
rolls?
I have a call into her.
Well, we do have the certified roll,
I have the roll.
but we don't have the calculation of the effective and rollback rates yet. We're waiting for that. The final number was 5%, is that right?
It's a little over 4%
Okay.
increase.
Yeah, so it's pretty close to the number that we've been working on, and I think the net increase was something in the range of $20,000 or $30,000.
It was a $53,000
Okay.
increase for the general fund over what we had looked at before. The roll that they sent us, most of it is certified. I believe there was like 25 million that is still under protest. So we were making some assumptions about what that would be settled at, and then our collection rates. And when we applied that, we were getting an extra 53,000 in revenue for the general fund. And then also on the debt service side, we'd get it.
And where did you say that would put us percentage-wise?
Just under 5.
Yeah, I think,
Under five.
yeah, I don't remember exactly offhand, but I think that's right. I think 4.5.
Any other questions?
Well, I don't have any other question. I just think it's fortuitous that we have these numbers and this much written down, and we haven't really started on the comprehensive plan yet. And that this provides good guidance for the comprehensive planning process, and the planning process will also may cause us to want to change some of this. And I can certainly see for the next fiscal year, we've got to go ahead and do something. And that's perfectly understandable. But I think it behooves us to, again, encourage the citizens to get involved and let us know how they feel about things. Because we're here ultimately to define what they need and what they want and what they think. And I'm looking for input from that, from both of these activities. And I applaud the energy that's been put into all these numbers, because I can remember when I was working with lots of big numbers, and they can slide all over everywhere. And the other thing I told the city manager is I would round off some of those numbers and use a bunch of zeros at the end. And then it sounds like I'm not sure about them. But when I see $914,382.50, I either don't believe it or somebody's kidding me, you know.
We round off when we borrow.
Yeah, well, that's kind of after the fact, though.
We round up, Warren.
Well, that may be good or may be bad, you know. If I applaud George for raising the idea about we need to consider what happens, because I'm willing to bet you that sometime between now and, you know,
2025.
yeah, 2025,
There will be a downturn.
we're going to see some kind of economic hiccup. We could see something approaching a war. Unfortunately, I don't like to talk about that, but it's not that far out of there when you realize how many hungry people there are in the world that we're not feeding. And, you know, there's just a lot going on that will could possibly impact us that we there's no way you can estimate or cover all of those things.
And that's the good idea also about the comprehensive plan committee and putting it on as a bond issue, because that
Yeah.
way there's an opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Well, and thank you for your compliments. This is something that the two people over here worked very, very hard on, and then working with the department heads in trying to get something in front of you. And while it's not baked by any means, it's very soft in the oven right now. And I think it's at least something to work with as options. And so,
oh yeah, I could believe all of it is order of magnitude kind of realities. You know, the numbers. You probably haven't missed them by more than 10 or 15% in either direction, I bet.
just a few million.
That's
Few million here, few million
well.
here.
He came from Dallas. Those numbers don't bother him.
Well,
Yeah.
they don't bother me either. I came from a different place, but
Yeah.
had lots of millions of dollars, and you've got to make them all come out at the end. Somebody writes a check, and somewhere somebody takes that and goes and gets groceries.
Remind me once more along those lines. You're talking about through 2027, all these things you have in the package in this page 5, is that there is contemplating no property tax increase.
That's correct.
Rate.
Some of it, now, the way this was laid out, Mayor, is that it's all general obligation bonds, but the park components would be EIC supported, okay?
Yeah.
Just like we sell COs, and then they're tax-backed, secured by taxes on the water and wastewater side, but the water and wastewater are paying for that debt. So it's basically taking advantage of your bond rating on your GO side to sell at a better rate, but you're completely funding the debt service through another source like EIC or water wastewater.
On parks and
On the park space. Now on the public safety building and the streets and drainage,
Right.
what we're suggesting there is that would be tax supported, direct
Yes.
tax supported.
but you don't show with what you have here as an increase in the rate. Is
That's
what I'm saying.
correct.
Yep. Any other questions? Any questions by the audience? You work here.
So that concludes the capital budget piece of it. We've been through all of our other major funds. There are some smaller funds that you may have some questions about, particularly after you get the proposed budget by the end of this month. So that's the next step that we'll be working on with the staff, is finalizing all that. So if you could do me a favor, and if there's some feedback that you have about anything that you saw through these 3 budget workshops that you'd like to see different, whether we didn't include something you'd like to see or something that you would not like to see there, just please let me know so that when we prepare that final proposed budget, we'll at least have taken that into consideration. We got a lot of good feedback, that we made a lot of notes, and we've incorporated already pretty much everything that we think we heard. But if you still have any questions or concerns about things, then please let us know. But even after that, when it's presented on August 8th, there's still plenty of time to make changes. So we'll go through some work sessions or public hearings with the public, both on the budget and the tax rate, leading all the way up to adoption in September. So plenty more opportunity.
And the public hearings will be in regular meetings.
Yes.
As last year.
Yes.
And the first hearing will be August the 8th? Or that'll just be?
That'll just be a
of it?
presentation of the budget.
What are the hearing dates if things go smoothly?
Do you have those offhand?
August the 22nd and September 12th, I think.
August 22nd, September 12th.
August. You said
22nd?
August 22nd and
Yes,
September
and
12th.
September
I mean,
12th.
it's 23rd, I'm sorry.
Oh.
I'm off a day.
August.
Second meeting in August.
What?
And then if you would just remind us of when we have to be here, when we vote by number, do we need, well, could it be by a quorum when we vote on the tax rate and the adoption? Does every vote need to count?
Yeah, no, it's a majority vote,
Yeah, okay.
yeah. But I'd like
We
you
just
you
do
all
it
to
by
be
roll
here.
call, right?
Are you planning on a trip?
Nope, not
Okay.
at all, ever.
Okay,
The August meeting is the 22nd.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? If not, we have a lot to chew on with these corrections and things, and we appreciate all the work that everyone's done, and we've worked a lot on it too, looked through it, and there'll be a lot of interesting comments, I'm sure, from the public, and so,
And we'll be getting more information as before you are asked to adopt a budget, such as, changing gears now on rate schedules for fees,
right.
for a variety of things. We're not proposing very many, but we have proposed some that you've heard about all of those, but we'll give you those schedules so that you can see those. And here in another hour or so, you're gonna hear from Kim about health insurance, which impacts the budget. And so you'll be getting a lot of supplemental information leading up to the adoption of the budget.
And I'm sorry again, when did you expect to have that all together for us to review?
So by law, by charter, I've got to have it filed with Brenda by the last day of this month. And so it'll be filed with her, and then I'll present it on August 8th.
But we will have it,
You will have it,
yes.
yes. And it's not going to be, final form of a budget that's fully published. It's going to be basically summary data by fund, and then it'll be combined summary for all funds, and it'll be all the detail for every single fund. So you'll get new books that'll have, lots of detail. And then once the proposed budget, some version of it, is adopted by you all, then we'll go to publish the full version of a budget, which includes a manager's message, just lots of other supplemental information, something about performance measures for departments, looking more at priorities and tying back priorities to expenditures, and that'd be the published version that will then go on to the GFOA to be reviewed.
At some point in time also, I had asked you, but just for council knowledge, that we have a workshop, since there are so many things in water and sewer, and since that was one of our priorities, at our retreat, to make sure that we have future needs met there. Back in 2012, I think, somewhere around in there, they had a workshop for just water and sewer. And, anticipating growth and needs for water, needs for sewer, and I don't know if you want to combine that in you said maybe with one of our workshops that we
Right.
just talked about.
Right. Your next workshop, and I guess we're kind of getting offline here, Mike might tell me to, that your next workshop is on code enforcement. So there are budget implications on that.
Sure.
And so we'll be talking about that. It's in August, your first really workshop that's dedicated just to discussion about a variety of topics. And I think we're trying to gear up for the following one to be around water. And we could include sewer as well if you'd like. Maybe comparing to looking at our master plans and what we've done and not yet done, and having that discussion.
Okay. Any others? If not, we'll adjourn at 5:04 and reassemble at 6.